I'm overweight, I'm fat, and I hate myself for it. I'm not a lazy person, and I work hard for others. So why can't I work hard for myself?
I relate with that too. I think having times in my life having put my worth, my self-worth into what I do for other people, and that's an endless treadmill.
There's obviously an equity imbalance there. Everything we do has an unconscious benefit. What does he love about the job? What does he love about his work? And what are the sort of relationships that he'd love to have? And in getting clear on that and your values around that, you'll be able to be more conscious of, what it looks like acting purposefully, acting consciously with your relationships in service to others versus what are the, again, short-sighted coping strategies.
We're all imperfect, but worthy of love and belonging.
Hi, I'm Hayden Brown. I'm a human behavior specialist, and I help people resolve the root cause of their long-term patterns and emotional challenges so they can start living more purposeful and fulfilling lives.
Hi, I'm Greg, a life and business design coach, and I help business owners and leaders design a life they genuinely love so they can live with intention, freedom, and by design, not default.
The goal of Breakthrough is to help you create real changes in your life. We do this by helping you uncover the why behind why you're stuck, help you gain clarity in what you truly want, and give you the tools to get there. With that said, let's get into the show. Greg, episode 2.
We've made it.
We've made it. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. We are 3 weeks into 6 months in a caravan with a family of 5. So we are finding our rhythms, working that out. And then I really enjoyed our episode last week. Something I've been thinking about is you talked about making a list of the benefits of staying where we are or living how we currently are, and then making a list of the benefits of change. And that's just a great frame to become conscious of why we're currently doing what we're doing. So I really enjoyed that and looking forward to today.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about you?
Look, I'm great, my friend. I mean, I say great in the context of, we've got 3 young kids, 2 under 2, essentially. So a little bit of a sleepless night last night, but I'm here, and as one of the core tenets of the show, I'm purposeful and living my values from being here. So I'm good. So let's get straight into it. Now, one thing actually that I didn't perhaps set up last week is we have our in-house producer, Jamie. And Jamie's role is essentially fielding, the questions, the voice notes that are submitted, and finding, the right questions for the show that hopefully we can all take something from. So, Jamie, what have you got for us today, please?
Yeah, okay. Today we have Matt, and he's submitted a voice note and a question, and we're going to start off with the question. And that question is, why do I prioritize everyone else's needs over my own? My health is suffering.
Wow, that is a great question. They're really relatable for me personally, but also I imagine a lot of people that are listening would relate to that, prioritizing other people's needs and then suffering as a result. What's your initial thoughts when you hear that?
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to see the voice note and get a bit more context of the specifics. But at a high level, I think you and I were speaking about this a couple of weeks ago, Greg. The most common things that I see in the clients I work with is the most common patterns are people pleasing and conflict avoidance. And, oftentimes the people pleasing and conflict avoidance can be very, very slippery. Oftentimes we think, oh, that's not me, or et cetera. But sometimes we can be a high achiever, and, we can mask our people pleasing perhaps through external success or external achievement. Or if it's a case of conflict avoidance, it can sometimes be that we might justify or have this cognitive bias. No, I'm going to leave it. I'm being over the top here. But very regularly when I'm working with clients, you find if you look at those deeper levels, there is this pattern of putting others' needs above your own. And then, of course, the ripple effect of that, which can often be self-sabotage, self-doubt, medicating yourself in other ways to escape that pain that you're carrying and putting everyone else first. So it'll be interesting to see where today's question goes and getting some more context.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to get into it.
Okay.
Hey, Hayden. It's Matt here. Just want to get a bit of advice, really, on how I can make myself a better person. I get glimpses of myself and see myself in mirrors, and I'm overweight, I'm fat, and I hate myself for it. I get snide comments quite often from people, sometimes at work, sometimes from from friends, sometimes from family members. I had a pretty resonating comment from a nephew of mine a wee while ago, and he said, "Man, you're fat. When are you going to lose some weight?" And I know I'm fat, and I struggle with it. I'm a jovial kind of guy, and people take me at face value and think that I'm okay with things, but I'm really not. And I come home and I get quite depressed about it, to be honest. And that depression leads me to drink, and I drink a little bit too much, and then I drink a little bit too much, and it puts on more weight. And I don't know how to stop the cycle. I don't eat unhealthily, but sometimes I do, and then that makes me feel really guilty, and then because of that, I beat myself up, and it spirals me even more. So then I go out and get a packet of lollies to cheer myself up, and I'll eat those, and then I feel guilty, and I get an immense sense of guilt and self self pity and self worth. Well, like I'm a worthless person, and I don't know how to stop that. I don't know how to understand how to break that cycle, and I don't like it. I want to be healthy. I want to be fitter. I want to just be a better human, and there was a time when I lost a lot of weight and I was feeling good, and then I put it all back on again, and I don't know how to stop that. My job is a social job, and I work hard. I don't have a lot of time for exercise. I'm quite often either in the car driving to appointments or behind a desk. Um, I don't want to make excuses for myself, but sometimes I feel like I should get up in the morning and do something, but I'm tired, and I'm tired because I'm fat and I'm overweight, and I don't know how to get past that. I don't know how to make myself feel that sometimes it is okay to be fat, but I also don't understand why I need to be better, how to help myself get better. I know what I've got to do, but I'm not a lazy person, and I work
Mm.
hard for others. So why can't I work hard for myself? And that's a problem, and it's a problem I'd like to understand. Um, I hope you can help me. Cheers.
Well, first of all, thank you to Matt for submitting such a real, relatable
Yeah.
question.
Definitely.
I say relatable in the sense that, whether it's weight, whether it's our health in other regards, whether it's simply burnout, sort of as we spoke about earlier, I think actually this is a real question that most of us can relate to if we look at our life past and present and look in certain areas. What is the dynamic where perhaps we are putting others' needs above ourselves, and we're the ones suffering, we're the ones paying the price. So I think the first thing that jumps out to me, and perhaps where we need to start, Greg, is this idea of self-worth and perhaps our self-image. It sounds like for Matt and Matt's voice note that it's very much based on his self-image or his self-worth being based on this external metric of what he's doing for others. Very revealing at the end, I work hard for others, but not myself. So there's obviously an equity imbalance there, okay? And I know that when we spoke in the first episode, I believe I said, that everything we do has an unconscious benefit, okay? And so I think if we start with that, it's going to be, again, looking at what are we running away from and what are we trying to run to, okay? And of course, there's underlying unconscious pain points that result in us putting our self-image, our self-worth in how others see us or what we're doing for them or maybe what we're achieving or how much money we have, as opposed to actually, who are we and are we taking the actions that are purposeful to us?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I relate with that too. I think having times in my life having put my worth, my self-worth into what I do for other people, and that's an endless treadmill that we need to keep going and keep doing. And like you said, often it's not conscious. Or we're running from something and trying to run to something, but it feels like we just do it and we don't know why. So, Matt, we can appreciate your question. What would you say in terms of from people that you see, or specifically for Matt, that are putting their self-worth into something external, whether it is maybe specifically for Matt going self-worth is attached to weight at the moment, but also self-worth attached to helping other people and being good at work. Is that a pattern that you see, and where does that come from? What's going on there?
Absolutely. So I think, again, often these things can be very, very slippery, right? I know I've used that word a couple of times about separating out what is truly fulfilling and purposeful to you versus perhaps what is the trauma response or coping mechanism that you might be doing to avoid pain. And in this case, I feel very confident that the avoiding of pain is definitely centered around others. And I would imagine, if I was to take an educated guess, perhaps how Matt's seen by others, right? And so, if Matt was here, I would want to be asking, has he had past experiences of perhaps he's felt that he's been rejected, and just to clarify, Greg, I mean, we're not necessarily talking about, in recent years, we're talking about very earlier life experiences that we might have really internalized. And essentially, the number one purpose of the brain is to help us avoid threats. And so we go through these early life experiences. The most common sort of dynamics that I find with clients is high school, parents, early childhood friends. And it basically sets us up for these wounds. And in one regard, that creates our strengths. I mean, I recall I wrote down here, Matt said he works very hard for others and he shows up well for them. And so, at an educated guess, I would say that Matt's very reliable. We see it in a social job, and I'm sure that his clients think very highly of him. So arguably he's developed these skill sets to deliver for others. And I think we want to have some gratitude for that fuel has got us there, but that same fuel is also holding us hostage in a way where we have to be showing up a certain way for other people.
Yeah, so interesting. So if I just make sure I understand, you're saying that there's early relationships, early experiences that we have that will form typically some sort of pain that we then seek to avoid.
Absolutely.
And something that we then find out a coping mechanism. Maybe it's I work hard for others,
yes.
and that then feels, when I do that, I imagine there's then I'm accepted, then I seem to get people's approval, then I'm wanted in some regard. So we go, let's do more of that. Is that what you mean with?
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe two things I'll add there. So one is, I think you touched on this earlier, is it does become a never-ending cycle. So because it's not truly about delivering for the one client this week, the one thing on, it's actually truly about trying to avoid these deep-seated wounds, these pain points. You are always going to find different scenarios that trigger that wound and those, corresponding beliefs that might be, I'm not good enough, I have to prove myself, clients don't value me, etc. So, you'll always be on the back foot when you're basically projecting those past wounds onto the present. I think the other thing I'll clarify just quickly, Greg, because I know it's going to be a real core tenet of the show, and we've spoke about it a bit already as well, is this idea of coping mechanisms, right? So, when I say coping mechanisms, really what we're talking about here is ways that we have associated to avoid pain. Now, I would suggest that, 9 times out of 10, certainly in the clients that come to me, and perhaps what we're looking to do with these calls and really helping people become conscious, is, they are hidden motivations. They are unconscious self-soothing strategies, you might say, that help us avoid these pains. And so, there were 2 for me, interestingly, that stood out for Matt, and in reality, there's probably more. The first one, as you pointed out, was, almost this desperation behind working hard for others and trying to over-deliver there, which is a form of coping mechanism. You get that temporary relief. Okay, I've delivered for Hayden or Greg or whatever work that he does. I've ticked that off and I've exceeded or met their expectations. You get that dopamine hit, but how long does that really last, right? Because it's not truly about that. It's really about this compensation from the past. So I think there was 2 coping strategies for me that stood out, which is a short-sighted attempt to avoid pain. It's not coming from that same values and purpose-driven philosophy that we spoke about earlier. It's a short-sighted, often unconscious, short-term mechanism to avoid pain. And in this case with Matt, I think it was really trying to do right by his clients and relationships. And then also he spoke about the alcohol and the food as well. Now, perhaps with those 2, he did sound very conscious, being frank, that those were his ways of coping and giving him that temporary sort of complementary opposite feeling. But at the same time, those coping mechanisms are playing out because they do offer some temporary relief. And I think that we need to acknowledge the fact that they offer the temporary relief, Greg, is why we do them. And then we need to actually look at, well, ultimately, is it working? And is it working relative to what gives us purpose and how we'd love to show up for us.
So it sounds like for Matt, what you're saying is there's I love what you're saying. There's a few things: coping mechanisms to avoid pain, hidden motivations, self-soothing. I mean, we all have little ways that we do this in our own ways, whether it's social media or alcohol or different ways that we get other people's approval, all those things. And then that it tends to be short-sighted, often unconscious, and avoiding pain. What would be so it sounds like Matt's quite aware of some of that stuff. He's saying, look, I'm doing this. I don't want to, but I'm doing it. And I want to feel better, so I get some lollies. He's aware to a degree. Maybe there's some unconscious things that are driving that around acceptance or worth or some other things. What would be the healthy version if he's saying, look, as well, I want to be better. I want to, in this instance, be more healthy. How do you go about going, what's not short-sighted? How do you work out or start to, operate from a different place? Yeah,
great question. And look, this is going to take us back to a couple of core tenets of the show, right? You and I have spoken a lot about, what do you truly want? And that's also going to lead us back to the idea of values and, the real priorities in our life that does give us a sense of purpose. I made a couple of notes. There was a couple of keywords that Matt used that I thought were quite revealing. He sort of used this vague, almost ambiguous term of a better person, right? Better person, et cetera. And, obviously I'm reading between the lines here, but the feel that I got from that is it's really rooted in a better person for others, or more specifically, again, how he's seen, right? And so again, we need to contrast that or get clear on what's most important to him. Because, there's a difference between, let's say, for example, in my work, right? There would be a difference between if my highest value is problem solving and helping people really get to the bottom of their behavior cycles and emotional challenges, me showing up, living that value might be having the hard conversations. And, one analogy I give is if I say to an individual, I think this might be to do with your relationship with your father, and they say no, there could be a conflict avoidance pattern that comes up in which I don't want to push that more because I could be afraid of what they think if I push that. Or there might be a more values-driven approach in this instance, which will be me saying, respectfully, sir, I really think that this is where it is, and I think this is where we need to look. And ironically, in taking a more values-driven approach aligned with what brings us purpose, that's actually where you'll gain the respect and develop that relationship with others. But the summary of what I'm trying to say here really, Greg, is that getting clear on, I did get the impression his work was important to him. I think that there's him doing it for others as an effective coping mechanism, but also I did get the impression that his work has the real potential to be rewarding and fulfilling, and he does value service to others. So I would really love Matt to connect with what does he love about the job? What does he love about his work? And what are the sort of relationships that he'd love to have? And in getting clear on that and your values around that, you'll be able to be more conscious of, what it looks like acting purposefully, acting consciously with your relationships and service to others versus what are the, again, short-sighted coping strategies. And maybe that's giving, maybe in that instance for him, it's overcommitting with timelines, or telling people, they'll have that on Friday, where in actual fact, it should have been Wednesday, but there was just an overcommitment there, driven by this, I don't want to let them down, or I don't want them to reject me. So if he can get clear on really what he loves about what his work is, and perhaps what more equitable, sustainable, fulfilling relationships in his life would look like, I think that would create a real contrast between the short-sighted protective instincts that are holding him hostage and then creating this ripple effect of impulsive behaviors versus him showing up in those relationships that have equity and also build his self-worth in the process.
Wow. There's so much in there. Just going back to what you said, and I hadn't picked this up, was when Matt had said, I want to be a better person. And you're making the connection there, a better person for who? Who do you want to be there? Is it more people at work, or is it for people that have said things about your weight, but actually doing it for yourself and from a place of value?
It needs to be rooted in that.
Your own personal values. That's really powerful. What would you, in terms of someone, well, for Matt, there's a connection that I saw there that is heartbreaking and also relatable at the same time, where he said, I do feel this way. I am fat, and that's, I don't know Matt, but he's saying that of his own assessment, and I feel like a worthless person. was some exact words I wrote down, which which is hard to hear, but we also experience that in how we talk to ourselves
Yes.
sometimes. How does getting back from what others think of you and becoming a better person for other people, how does bringing that back to I'm doing this for me and what I value, how does that help your sense of worth and your self-acceptance and those pieces there?
Yeah.
Because, that's a really core part for all of us on a healthy place to live from,
Yes.
as opposed to I don't like myself, so I change. And then, there's a never ending, when will I feel accepted?
And losing yourself in the process, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So, when you are taking actions that are aligned with what gives you purpose, you'll find that one of the core physiological changes with that is you won't be on that emotional roller coaster. You're more resilient, you're more adaptive, in those challenges, or, if he's got some clients and, maybe there is a challenge, maybe he didn't, maybe he overlooked something, and set up with the right foundations, you'll find that you actually, you're not showing up with those same emotional triggers. Okay. And another cue, I guess, of what you could call it, is that you're going to be, again, in being less short-sighted, you're going to be more so on the journey. So, for example, if I love working with clients and problem solving, and I'm coming from that real core value of working things out for people, I'm not expecting myself to have everything perfectly laid out in the first session so they think I'm great or so I'm not rejected. I'm actually prepared to maybe not have it right the first assessment, for them to say, I don't think that's quite right, but it might be this. And, a real symptom of that is you're on that journey. And with each action you take that's proportionate to the real why that you're doing it, you actually raise your self-worth because you have integrity in following through on what you value, not the short-sighted compensatory, I've done this thing for them, I temporarily have some relief. And then ultimately at the end of the day, as Matt describes, you're carrying that all day. And then there's the coping strategies in the evening. So there's a bit there, sorry, Greg, but I think, again, we come back to this idea of getting clear on what gives you purpose. Maybe for Matt, it's getting clear on actually what was some of the fundamental reasons he got into this career. If it's, a financial advisor or accounting, I get the impression it's some form of consulting. Was it to, really help other people get to the bottom of their issues? Was it to give really specialized advice? And if he can get clear on that and really become conscious of where he does that and how he does that in his own unique values and through his own unique strengths, then I think that is going to become a much clearer, more sustaining metric for him if he's showing up from that place, irrespective of if it goes perfect or irrespective of if they see that value, if he knows that he's taking actions from that place, as opposed to trying to avoid this fear of what they might think or what he ultimately is running from.
Yeah, that's awesome. I imagine as well the ability to know what your values are and then to be living them out means it's not something that's a future date or in the future or someday, that you have this sense of whatever you are wanting to experience, whether that's acceptance, whether that's belonging, whether that's a sense of achievement, that you can say, I lived my values, it brings it into today. Like I can live this today. I would like to ask as well, like something that Matt mentioned was this is work, and then he mentioned a number of times specifically around his weight and the patterns around that. Is there something around values or something around the acceptance and the new behavior or something around that you think could be helpful for Matt and also in general for all of us that are trying to make changes that go, oh, there's someone I want to be that I'm not, and it's really frustrating, and I have patterns that I'm trying to break. Just anything around the weight aspect, maybe specifically of values and then operating from that place.
Absolutely. So it needs to be in understanding, your own drivers, your own, I call it purpose priorities, right? Your own priorities that give you purpose. And starting to get clear on that, you can actually look at, well, what would you gain personally from prioritizing your health? And, I do get the impression from Matt's question that he would sincerely like to prioritize his health himself. But, he also said some revealing things like, it's okay to be fat. And so I would suggest that the highest priority driver of him expecting himself to be leaner ultimately is for others and how he may look for others, etc. But I think intertwined with that is he does see the value in doing it himself. So I think this is where we get caught up in what I would call injected values, which is the idealisms or the values of others that, might sound good on paper. They might tick a box, but isn't really it isn't really our highest priority at this point of our life, right? I think you and I have spoke previously about, if you asked me many years ago about my social relationships when I was building my consulting business, that would have been a lower priority for me, right? And maybe others could say, oh, well, that shouldn't be the case, etc. But ultimately, we each live by a set of values at any given point of our life, and fulfilling that, for taking action on those, is going to be what gives us purpose. And so I think with Matt, defining why would him prioritizing his health or his weight be important to him, and being very conscious of the answers that come up that are, oh, well, I avoid criticism from others, I avoid the jokes, because again, you see how that's baked in avoidance of pain, not truly something that he perceives would benefit his values. So is it for others or is it for himself? Okay. And like I said, I think there was enough evidence there that he does want it, but I think the predominant driver is running from pain, and that is never going to be a sustainable driver. It's an emotional driver, and then, paradoxically, if it's an emotional driver, we then have the coping mechanisms to escape the emotions. So I think for Matt, it would be understanding what he truly values. If it is his career, what is it about his career? What does he strive to do for his clients? If it is his health and fitness, how would that benefit him? Right? Would that improve his cognitive performance, in his work? Would it improve his relationships? Maybe he has kids or grandkids and he would genuinely love to be more mobile and more physical with them. In him associating what he values and how health supports that, not how it helps him avoid temporary pain, that is going to be the sustaining link that allows him to do it for him and take sustaining actions, not short-term up and down behaviors and the emotional residue that comes with that.
Well, there's so much good stuff in that. I think there's some things that I can do as well, thinking about what are the things that you truly value, having a picture of the future.
Yes.
And a future self that is aligned to personal values, not, well, then other people would think this of me as a result. One thing I would like to add is just personally is around some of the content from Brené Brown around vulnerability and connection, and the fact that we are hardwired for connection from her research, just from what Matt was saying around how he feels about himself and the self-identity that's wrapped up in that, is that I would separate them into two things, that there's the inherent worth of a person. And then she says at the end of her TED Talk, that her viral TED Talk was, we shouldn't teach our kids to be perfect or try to perfect them, but teach them that they are imperfect but worthy of love and belonging.
Yes. And
I'd say that to Matt is, we're all imperfect but worthy of love and belonging. So there's this that part of but actually, is it okay to be fat? I'd say it's, I think that's touching more on the hearing the two things, going, but isn't okay. I'm hearing a resonance of acceptance. I want people to accept me for me and to value me.
Yes.
And I would say 100% yes, and we should do that for other people. And at the same time, I want to change. And those can coexist at the same time, but they're different things. One being just inherent humanity, accepting others and being accepted, and then also making change at the same time. It's not like, well, you should love me as I am and I should never change. I think it's a common narrative we hear. And then there's like, well, I will accept you more when you change. I think both of those are unhealthy. Love you, accept you. You have inherent dignity, absolutely. And I want what's best for you. But again, not I want what's best for you, that's someone else.
Yeah.
But I just hear those two things for Matt, which is we're hardwired for connection. We need vulnerability to do that. And he's doing that right now with sharing openly and honestly, which is a step in that direction to connect with people. But yeah, that's probably speaking to the shame loop that I think he mentioned a few times, which Brené talks about as well. There's guilt is I've done something wrong and I can change it. Shame is there's something wrong with me. And that there's something wrong with me leads to secrecy, silence, and judgment. We hide away. And I think he's taking great steps by even leaving a voice note. But I just want to encourage that direction of continuing to go to spaces, connect with people that do accept you for you, and do the behavior that change requires as well.
Absolutely. And I think perhaps just to finish, there's a great, love what you're sharing there around valuing yourself, accepting yourself. And we spoke earlier about building your self-worth and your self-worth being proportionate to your values and the actions that you're taking that support that. And so as much as I do get the impression that Matt would love to prioritize his health more for him. I don't get the impression that it is sincerely as high on his values as perhaps he's injecting it into his life being. And so I think, one exercise that I'd love Matt to actually do is if he looked at how his actions, yes, he may not be where he wants to be with his health, but if he looked at his priorities at this point of his life, his drivers, and I get the impression it's his career, I'm confident that if he looked at those actions, there's a lot of tangible outcomes that he is creating for people in his life. And his actions and outcomes in life at this point in his life are proportionate to that higher value on building his career or delivering for his clients. Now, yes, that may be infused with this fear of how he could be seen or judgment, and that's creating the dynamic that we've mapped out today, but also taking a moment just to appreciate that you are a human, you do live by a specific set of values, and at any given point, you are honoring those values. So it can be refined, and we can look at, overcoming that past pain or those wounds that are subtly taking us off in a self-sabotaging direction, but at the same time honoring that it does sound like Matt is prioritizing what's most important to him and actually respecting himself for that.
Yeah, that's great. That can be a challenging thing to look at, to say at any stage you are actually living out your values or something that is benefiting you. I think at times that can be a positive thing that you feel great about and also confronting, but
yes,
but good to have the awareness, to raise the awareness and raise the level of responsibility to go, these are expressing my current values and I can choose. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to clients, Greg, what we're looking to do is, clarify the values, of course, look at what's in the way of those. And then when it comes, as you said, we are moment to moment, our actions do demonstrate an attempt to fulfill our values. But is it the most effective and efficient way to do that? So I think if we hold both ideas at the same time, where yes, there's some of these people-pleasing or conflict avoidance, very likely patterns with Matt are holding him back and keeping him in that loop, and likely not respecting himself in those relationships as well, which is a whole nother topic of how that sets up unequitable relationships. But at the same time, again, respecting that he is actually taking actions that are fulfilling his values. But how could he, in a sense, get out of his own way to be more purposeful there? Yes, still prioritize his health, but prioritizing it for him, not for others. All right, thanks for tuning into episode 2 and following along with the journey. We hope you got value from this. Again, if you're on this journey with us early on and you got value, please leave a comment below. If you're on Spotify or YouTube, leave us a review, help us get the show out there, and we'll see you for the next episode.